One of the other things that we deal with display cases, Wilma, is really the air environment within the display case. And so very often we try and treat these as closed boxes. So the air exchange rate is very low. So in other words, the air doesn't travel through the display case. And because of that, what we can do is we can individually treat the display case at a lower relative humidity or at a higher relative humidity, and we can create what we call microenvironments. And in this case, what we have the ability to do is underneath these display cases, we have large trays that pull out, and we can put essentially pre-conditioned silica gel in there. They're usually in capsules now. But basically you add humidity into the silica gel, or you take humidity away from it, you put it in there, and then it will affect the overall humidity within the display case.
It's not lying directly on the fabric of the panel. So you've put a little barrier in between, and that barrier is a perspex material, is it?
Yes, it's a perspex material, and it's essentially something that's inert, so it's not going to interact with the object and cause a chemical reaction. It also protects it from movement, so it's not sliding around. And what we can also do, because of the way in which we've mounted this particular object, is that we can turn the pages over. And you know, as we've mentioned before, that reduces the impact of light over a long period of time. One of the problems that we have with books is that very often the spine is put under pressure. This one was already very, very loose, and so we felt that we could display it fairly flat. Other books and displays that you'll see around are actually on a V-shape mount, and that's just to take the pressure off that spine really and give it a little bit more support. We also use polyester strips, and you can see them just slightly shining at the edges, and that just keeps things in place and doesn't allow things to curl back up again. And again, it just stops things moving around a little bit.
And this display case has a glass ceiling, so that helps you to make use of the light that you have in the gallery already. Exactly. And that means you don't need to add in additional spotlights, which could then potentially fade the items that are in the case.
Absolutely, and we again, it's always that balance between enough light to see the objects well, but not too much that you're adversely damaging the items. We are, by nature of putting things on display, we are damaging objects, and you know, once you accept that, what you're looking to do is reduce that damage wherever possible. And one of the other things that we do is we test, or certainly we expect others to test, the materials that are used in the construction of display cases and indeed mounts to make sure that they are as inert as possible so that they don't affect the objects. So we don't use plywood because that has a lot of wood acid in and a lot of formaldehyde in the glues. There's a type of MDF, the particle board that we use, that has reduced formaldehyde in it. We can create barriers between the wood and the objects that we use, because nearly everything ends up with wood in it at some point, but that has acids in. And so we use varnishes that are particularly good at creating barriers, but we can also iron on foil called Moist Stop foil. And we can use fabric that is tested as inert as possible. And this particular fabric, there's some grey fabric embedded in these plinths, has been ODI tested. And as you know, as a conservator, that ODI testing is a standard test to test that reactivity with other objects and the way it degrades. And finally, the other thing that you can see in this display case are little brass mounts. Now, they don't look like brass because we've spray painted them, and it's essentially a powder coat. But again, we're using materials that are as inert as possible, so brass isn't going to rust, and then therefore affect the object that it's holding in place.
So any chemicals that would come out of wood or fabric will stay in that environment and could build up to levels where they're going to be harmful over time.
Absolutely. And we refer to that as off-gassing very often. Shorthand is, you know, if you've got materials in there, we want to make sure that they have either previously off-gassed or that they are not going to have any volatile chemicals in there that will off-gas in, as you say, in that closed environment. It's great for controlling humidity and temperature in a display case that has very little air fluctuation, but bad if you're putting things together that are going to adversely affect each other. And actually that goes for the objects as well. You know, I've worked historically with objects that will damage other objects. And so you have to have that awareness or understanding of how materials interact with each other, either from a display setting or from the objects themselves.
And we have an object here where we can see that the material that it was made with was not taken into consideration for its long-term use. The paper is starting to yellow on the edges. Absolutely. And that yellowing is a sign that there is acidity build up in the paper. And when a book is closed, the place where that acidity can come out is only at the edges. So we see the edges go yellow. So here we have a very nice piece of furniture that allows you to store and display things at the same time.
Absolutely.
So you have lovely drawers, and let's have a look what's inside them.
They're quite heavy. So one of the reasons that they're quite heavy is because we don't want lots of shuggling and lots of jiggling as we open the drawers. But as you'll have seen, the light came on as you open the drawer. And this is that balance between display and storage that we're talking about, the lifetime exposure. And by making sure that the light turns off as you put the drawer in, it expands or it extends the life of these artworks. And these particular ones were drawn by Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's husband, which we're lucky to have in the collection. But we could have had these in a frame on the wall. But by doing so, that means they're exposed to the light all day. So whenever we are open to the public, they are exposed to the light. Whereas in this drawer, it means that they're only exposed to the light when somebody opens the drawer. So it's about finding that balance. So, you know, to try and encourage people to open the drawer, we have labels saying, "Open me." Ironically, children never need that encouragement. I think it's a bit of an old hangover from historic museums. So those of us who are slightly older remember storage being part of a museum display, and so all of the drawers used to be locked. It never stopped us trying, but as adults it means it puts us off now trying to open these drawers. So we often find that it's the children that rediscover drawers very quickly, and adults need a wee bit more encouragement. You can see as well that, again, these are on, you know, the card mount that's been created is acid-free. It creates a barrier between the object and the mount. The mount is acrylic again, so acid-free and inert. And then there is another low, or rather inert as possible, fabric in there. So everything that we do, we think about that barrier, that reduction in contact. And, you know, it's airtight drawers, they're well sealed, and we do test the environment in there occasionally. We don't need to do it very often because it is such a good seal in there.
It's a great way of combining storage with display, allowing the public to see items that can't really be exposed for light for too long. Perhaps we should put it back to bed.
I think that'd be a good idea.
So we were talking about environmental control and monitoring earlier, and these are the kind of things you might see in a museum on the wall, and that is to do with your monitoring and control system.
That's right.
So this is the equipment that measures the temperature and the humidity in the room. It might take a reading once every 5 minutes, and that information is then sent into the cloud where you have access to software with which you can interrogate that data. And that helps you to get the feeling that you know things are okay in your gallery. You don't need to come into this room with a handheld instrument and take a reading, which is how we used to do it, of course. And now we rely on the electronic equipment to do that for us. And it means you have the feedback from your monitoring back to your building management system, where all the heating and any ventilation and any cooling is automatically arranged.
So we go for a belt and braces approach in here. So the lower monitor, you're absolutely right, that's the building management system, and it self-regulates in theory. Perhaps I'm a bit old school in this, but I wanted to make sure that the building management system was actually telling me the truth as well. So we have another system, which is the one just above, which is just for environmental monitoring. So they both do the same thing. They both should give us the same readings, and more or less they do that, and that's why they're positioned near to each other. One of the things that we make sure that we don't do is we don't put them particularly high up. We don't put them particularly low down. They're at, it's that Goldilocks point. They're just right. In theory, they should be a little bit higher, but we wanted to maintain that level throughout the building, and there are some other restrictions elsewhere. And the idea is that we want to capture what is going on at the same zone that the collection is at. So if you put these things way up high, it might be saying it's really, really warm in here, but actually it's quite cool. Or it may be saying it's really humid because that warm air's taken the warm, humid air up high, but it's potentially dry further down. So, you've got to balance where to put this kit in line with all the artwork, which doesn't look particularly beautiful, with the need to monitor what's actually going on with the collection itself. You'll sometimes see little bits of kit in display cases as well that do the same sorts of things. And you'll even see little card triangles around the place, little tents, and we've got one in this gallery in a little corner, and that's so that we can monitor what pests are around, and insects. So we put these things out, they're little sticky traps, and they capture little creepy crawlies to make sure that we've not got a problem anywhere. We're not looking to attract them in, so we're not using pheromones, which attracts insects to the traps. We're just trying to see what's active and what's out there, because as you've mentioned, we're trying to create this barrier against the outside world, including beasties and creepy crawlies that eat a lot of our collections.